Life happens, and not always the way we expect it to. Every single day, we face change, stress, and uncertainty. What if you could learn to thrive no matter what life throws your way? Resilience expert Adam Markel and his inspiring guests explore breakthrough strategies to fully embrace change and build the resilience required to become change-proof.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Change Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Markel, and you're going to love the guest that I've got ready for you today. This gentleman is somebody with tremendous insight, great experience, and I just enjoy his presence. You're going to enjoy him as well. Let me read his bio, and then I'm going to jump right into it. So Dr. Anthony L. Simmons served 28 years as a Navy surface warfare officer, where he retired at the rank of captain. His Navy experience includes 4 at-sea commands, a patrol coastal, 2 AEGIS destroyers, and a destroyer squadron. Ashore, he worked in human resources at the Navy Bureau of Personnel and the Pentagon on the staffs of the Joint Chiefs and Naval Operations as a strategic planner and resource officer. Since retiring, Dr. Simmons has worked in the defense industry as a system and test engineer, experiment planner, and leadership instructor. He earned his doctoral degree in strategic leadership from Regent University. And also, Dr. Simmons is the founder of 6 Gear Consulting, which is a leadership performance consulting practice that instructs leaders on how to lead through bridging people and technology. Again, you're going to enjoy this conversation, so sit back, find a great place to relax and listen as we gain some tremendous insights from Dr. Anthony Simmons. Okay, Dr. Simmons, now you and I agreed I'm going to call you Anthony, but I wanted to at least get one of those in. All right, so
that's outstanding. I appreciate it.
No, that's just props for everything you've done, and you've had quite a career, quite an amazing journey, And what I really want to ask you, even though that your CV and the bio is impressive, and most people couldn't even imagine how you could fit all that in a single life, but you've managed to do a lot of those things that have made such a big impact. My question is, what's something that isn't a part of your record service and your job history and all those amazing credentials? What is one thing that's not included in that you would love for people to know about you that maybe people don't know about you?
I'm a blue collar guy. I spent a lot of time rehabbing homes and working special projects within the community. And also I have a hobby of working on automobiles. In fact, I was restoring a 2001 BMW 540 manual shift this weekend.
And have you always been like had a head for that, or just understood the components? I mean, like, how do you? Because I love cars myself. I've always enjoyed them and whatnot, but put me under it. I mean, I can figure some stuff out just common sense wise, but I don't know how they work, and so I would just I took something apart, I wouldn't be able to put it back together. Is my fear.
Yes, my father was an auto mechanic, so I sort of grew up around it. He always had my brother and I to always watch the parts, and he was self-employed once in the automobile industry, and also he always ensured that we was able to work on the cars that we drove. So I had a 67 Mustang, the same year I was born when I was in high school, and I just watched the stuff he did, and I just always had affinity for taking stuff apart. So once I restored that 67, I took the entire dash compartment out when I was 16 years old. Probably couldn't do it now. Just amazing how some things we can do when we're young, and now we sort of dare to do it. So yeah, so I was around it, and he was a good teacher. So I just had that opportunity, and just the hometown I grew up in. And the guys that came through in the 70s, you know, one of the best years for cars, around 67 to 69 time frame. So you had all the Chevelles, the Mustangs, that the Dodges that was on the street and pretty popular. So I grew up in that environment.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The original, those Camaros, those early Camaros.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Vets, obviously, those Stingray and all that.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Beautiful.
I was a Ford family guy, but I tell you, I still admired the Camaros and the Chevelles and the Corvettes. So absolutely.
And I want to just maybe follow that thread just a moment more, which is to say, when it comes to taking stuff apart, and putting it back together. I want to use this maybe as a metaphor. We'll try this on for size and see if it can fit throughout our conversation today. I mean, what do you learn when you're at that young and impressionable age about taking stuff apart and putting it back together, or diagnosing what might be wrong? Because we don't typically take something that's working, take it apart, put it back together if it's working. I think most often we do that when something's either not working or we want it to work better, And I imagine, if you wanted to get more performance out of an automobile, out of an engine, you might take it apart or add something to it to do that. But I want to get back to that, just sort of what's the mindset around doing that? Because you're going to break stuff, right? You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to put some things back together in the wrong way. And it's not going to work, right? I mean, or did you
Yes.
did you do it perfectly right out of the gate?
No, I didn't. In fact, I did take stuff apart that worked perfectly. My father brought me a gun that was ignited with a gas chamber in it once, and I took it apart on Christmas Day. And boy, he was so got off with it. He was like, I paid more for this gun than I paid for any of my guns, and you take the thing apart, springs went everywhere. So that was a bad experience. But go back to what you're talking. I did a lot with leadership, and I went the Air Command and Staff College in Montgomery, and down in 2001. I say that, and I learned that social science, really evolved right in the 60s. And I look at physical science and social science, and I see the parallels there, for it's tearing things apart and the discovery inside of things. So if you don't really dissect, what's the physical side or the social side, once you get inside of pieces, you understand, the makeup of it. And I think that's the beauty of it when you're there, what is an automobile engine or what have you, and just seeing how the mixture of parts. I recall the guys in my hometown when I was young, they would try to get the max power out of a vehicle, right? So the guys had these 350 engines, and they would take them apart and put a 400 intake on them, and they would get, maximize the power. So that's the beauty of it. Once you get inside and look at the internals, you say, what can I really, really do to add some value to what's really inside of here? So that was the big takeaway, I feel. And the same thing with the human being, on the social science side, you got to get inside of people and dissect them so you can see what's within the realm of the possible. And you have to be resilient, as I'm looking at on your shirt there, because there are going to be some failures that's in life, and also in your challenges, as I talked about with the pellet gun that I took apart.
I want to get into the leadership thing too. I want to, and so you read my mind there. Maybe start with a little bit of your background, because you've had the opportunity to work at a very high level and lead folks in military service. So maybe just let's dig into where it was that you first started to learn about leadership yourself in some of those roles. Would you take us back in time to a bit?
Well, in life, we do things naturally. We find ourselves, eager, curious when you're kids, and find yourself in certain positions, making certain things happen. I was a quarterback. My first time I played football, I was 11 years old. I was a tight end, and but I always wanted to be the quarterback. Even we played what we call sandlot football, and I always wanted to throw the ball. But I was young, and so an older guy became the quarterback. So I begged the coach, let me just throw the pass occasionally, so he would put me back there on certain plays to throw the halfback pass, even though I was a tight end, but I would line up at running back. So the next year I was like, hey, I'm going to play quarterback regardless. So I went out for quarterback. I was not the guy he had selected. He had brought another guy that he knew to play quarterback, and I said, he has to beat me out. So I became a quarterback my second year playing football, and then when basketball was the same, I was always the point guard. I always felt that no matter what team I played on, I can will the team to win. I said, every guy that you guys choose your team, and I'll take the leftovers, and we're going to beat you with the guys that you guys don't want to have. So I had this innate ability, to just lead and make a difference. And I felt independent in my actions in doing that I didn't feel like I had to have someone to push me to make a difference. And as I began to grow and learn, and especially over the latter years, I had a chance to go back and see to pretty much validate some of those innate natural abilities. And I learned from my Clifton top 5, my ability is to be a learner, to be responsible, to be like a lifelong achiever. And then my spiritual gifts from Romans 12 is to teach. So that's just that's my natural makeup. And as I've learned that, and it just went back and it fed into the way I always happen to appear, and what I strive to be, from my formative years. And I just continue to, stay in on that glass slope. And then the Navy, fortunately, after playing sports through high school and collegiately, I joined the Navy, which is an organization that was, yeah, I was a ship driver. I had a lot of the fancy weapons and worked in combat, but I always like to tell people I really spent 28 years more like a sociologist more than anything, because it was all about the people around me, and then being able to interact with them and put them in a position to help, be successful as an organization. So
Yeah.
yes.
So a lesson that came out of your time in the Navy, I mean, it's a hierarchical structure. So unlike being, in a sporting structure, like in a sports, on a team, and where you could just decide, well, I want to be the quarterback, even though maybe somebody else was thinking that you weren't suited, or they weren't thinking that you were at first glance, they weren't thinking of you in that role, but you decided that you were going to be in that role, and then we're able to manifest that through hard work and
Yes.
proper attitude. And I imagine you practiced a lot and everything else. And then there's all this, natural acumen, natural skills. But in the Navy, or in any sort of hierarchical structure like that, you could decide that you want to be something, but maybe in that structure, it's either you have to have a lot of patience, or you have to go through certain process. You have to, and maybe there's some ceilings you can't bust through just because you decide, that you can do something. Any of that ring true for you?
It is, but it never bothered me. I always tried to understand the process. Even before the Navy, I would pay close attention to my high school football coaches. And I was like, gosh, man, they get to be a coach, they don't have to do all this sweating and what have you. And I said, maybe one day I'm going to aspire to be like them. No, I didn't, envy their position. They paid the price, they paid their dues. So I said, I want to be able to listen to them and be able to do what it took them to get to where they are. So I looked at it in kind. And I was same with the Navy. It was hard transitioning from a collegiate athlete going into officer candidate school, not because I wanted, to be front and center. It was just that I had this real aggressive nature, and I was real competitive, and I was more surrounded by people that was more academia, a big mixture, something I had not been exposed to. So you have to learn to be humble, and you have to be very patient, and just adjust to the environment and just understand the landscape. So that was, I felt, my key attribute. And as I got more involved in Navy, I would just watch the people that did have certain positions and ones I worked for, and I just continued to model, try to see could I do their jobs, and understanding I could not be them, because that comes with time. But I always try to, as much as I could, to supplant, whatever efforts they was doing, and to the point where they established confidence and trust in me, and what they give me more and more opportunities, and to do things. But I did. It was never a problem with positional authority, the hierarchy aspect of it. It was just, hey, if you do what you're supposed to do at this level, then those opportunities will present themselves, and you better be ready when they do. So I just want to make sure I was prepared for the next level.
Yeah. I'm not I don't think I've ever asked anybody that was in a role similar to yours, whether they had a mentor. I mean, I don't think I've asked that question of any of the. I mean, I've had lots of people that have had long and distinguished service careers, but I don't know that I've ever asked about mentorship in the context of military service. So what could you tell us about that? Is that a thing? Did you have
Yes, and you don't go anywhere in life, I feel, without good mentorship. I had a mentorship when I was growing up. I didn't know what mentorship meant. My father was more into the I'm gonna use the word agrarian lifestyle, because that's what he knew, and he believed in hard work. We farmed in the summertime. We did logging in the winter. That's what he knew. That's what he was taught. Hard work. It was not so much based on, the academic side. But I had a high school principal there that offered, me advice and gave me guidance on the importance of academics, set me up, facilitated, some of my learning, which the word mentor didn't exist, but I could not have accomplished and achieved the things I did, being prepared to go off to college and understand and appreciating education without having him there, supporting, my vision in that regard, and also shed, new light on stuff that I just been otherwise would I have had exposure to. And as you come into the military, it's very similar. And then it was probably not until maybe 5-10 years into the military that we made it pretty ostensible that, we would be assigned mentors. That's when it came was like a little more palatable, and we began to understand and meet with, those individuals that would help champion your career. So yeah, definitely. So I've always had, the pleasure and the luxury of a mentor throughout life. And that's why I try to give back as much as I can. But I changed my approach from mentorship to for as a coach. Some people use the word life coach. I don't really necessarily like that one. I like more like a career coach and professional development coach. So that way you can interact with people. So like on the level of co-equals, not like mentors, more like I see who you are, what you're doing, so he'd be like me. So that's not how it is. I want to draw introspectives, just have conversations, and it's like I said, it's more of a co-equal by someone you look up to based on their accomplishments. So it's a little different process. So so I try to be more like a coach protege model and vice mentor protege model.
And you were 28 years, is that correct?
28 years. Sure, I did 28
Navy?
years.
Yep.
Yes.
And so retiring from that, you were working on a transition plan, I assume, at some point as to what you were going to do after that, because it is such a structured life that I think it can be a challenge being on the other side of that, where that structure is no longer there. I mean, it's probably no different than I had a gentleman on our show couple of weeks ago. He was just retiring from a Fortune 500 company after 33 years, and he was wondering, what the heck am I going to do? And I don't have 10 meetings all booked up every day, because
Yes.
it's so structured. There's so much to do. You always know pretty much every minute, what it means to be on task. But on the other side of that, it's freedom, but it's also a lack of a certain
Yes.
structure. So
Yes.
maybe tell us a little bit about what that transition was like for you and what it is that you're currently.
You got to have foresight no matter what you do in life. You always got to plan ahead. Some things going to happen, that's going to be off ramps here and there. We just don't know what, sometimes on the road up ahead, but we have to be prepared for whatever direction, whatever life offers. So it goes back to simple as on a plane, talking with a retiree. And this is I'm still probably 12, 15 years into the Navy, and I'm talking to someone that's sitting next to me, and he was like, yeah, this life on the outside, not like it was in the military. It was so much structure in the military. People really cared about each other, and you can make so much happen. I hear no one cares about each other. It's just a free fall. And he's, I just really, really miss the military and et cetera. So enjoy it while you're there, So that's one. So I listened to that part of the conversation, but also listen to the other part. Like it's not the same on the outside. So what do? You take these skill sets. I traveled to over 63 countries. We did a lot of, you go back and look at this, consider the sale of the Great White Fleet. The Navy was always good at diplomacy. So we visit countries or had captains that would take the young officers in on their official calls and just teach us, how to interact with, dignitaries from other countries. And we went in, we did community relation project, goodwill project, sporting events, just throughout. So you take these lessons. So, how the United States Navy can influence, so many other parts of the world. And we're, pretty large, powerful Navy, but how do you make people comfortable that, develop partnerships so you can actually train and get at the bigger mission? And so I said, gosh, it's just some really powerful stuff I've been exposed to here. So now take this, and once you do lead a military, I had start preparing myself to get out and do like inspirational speeches and engaging peoples and organizations and trying to help those guys find efficiencies, get people to really appreciate each other, try to bring more unity and connectedness together, similar to what we did in the Navy, throughout other countries. Why can't we do this right here in America? with so many microcultures that exist in America, sometimes people just don't appreciate that. People talk about ethics, they talk about values, and those are strong beliefs. So sometimes, you got to get out of your, prism and your beliefs sometime and try to understand and appreciate things from another person's perspective. And that's when I went off and did my doctorate, and then I wrote my thesis on a champion organizational wellness, and which pretty much tees up how do you really, really have people to connect and appreciate each other, across, district cultures and throughout. So I modeled that from what I did in the Navy, and it was a vision that I started framing, probably, I guess around 20 years into it. And I started doing a lot of writing and what have you, and just putting all these different concepts together, and which now I'm able to realize that I'm just not really beginning to start that journey, and push some of those lessons out as I gain more footing, on the post-military.
So I want to know more about what's involved in championing organizational wellness, because I think
Okay.
that I know is something that near to us, near and dear to my heart personally, and
Yes.
in the times we're living in, what we can see, I mean, the signs are everywhere that people are burning out. Right?
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
are burned out, some are just in the process of burning out, right? But
Yeah.
anxiety levels, mental
Yes.
health challenges. I mean, this is real.
Yeah.
Nobody's screaming fire, and it's not a false alarm at this point. So
Yes.
yeah, so I think maybe we get a little granular on what that looks like to you, and
Okay.
yeah, I'd love that.
Okay, when I went to Joint Command Staff College, we tried to become Joint Qualified Officers, and I started at the basic with inter-organization relationships, and we were discussing 9/11 and, all the different information that was available, and how did we really apply that? It was enough information that probably could help us to prepare better, for what potentially happened. But sometimes you get overwhelmed with information. You don't know what information to really apply. So I always been big on the human intervention, the people skills. I started this company, 6-year consultant, 6 year in order to bridge people and technology to get, the common, the foundational pieces of human intervention in place. And so I fast forward that into champion organization, well, and done my doctorate degree, and then pulling from what I had experienced in the Navy with connecting people, some initiatives to have people work, together, looking at how we deal with the younger generations as far as a performance perspective. How do we do cross-functional training? A lot of different tools that I saw, and people. And you notice the term organization development is just so common. I say, a lot of people practice organization development, but they bring consultants, outsiders come in to work with organizations and teach certain skill set, but they never sustained itself. So I just went back and looked at what I had experienced in the Navy, the good, and the bad, force type leaders we had, the ones that was more inclusive, that provided platforms for and instruments for us to work better as a team. And that's what, and I implemented some of those programs in the ships that I was actually commanding. And one of them is the mentor, which I called a coach protege program. If I had kids come from different parts of the world, was not familiar with each other, I personally was involved with, aligning mentors and proteges so they could get to know each other, they can learn from each other. And that's another advantage of a coaching relationship, like mentoring. It's a relationship of co-equals where you guys really grow together. And that's what champion organizational wellness brings all these concepts together. So essentially what it distills down to is organizational wellness is the confluence of organization development plus organization sustainment. So how do I get development? I get it through, trying to grow as an individual through self-assessments, navigating blind spots, it's the alt self versus the won't self. That's overcoming some of maybe your cultural norms, some of your ethical beliefs and what have you. And then you link with another, your aspiring leader through a coaching conversation. And I always say, meeting people halfway is not the same. People got socioeconomic status, they got background differences. So halfway is not always the same distance for everybody. So how do you reach people? So I did my dissertation in leadership coaching when I was going through the doctoral program. So that was my means is to establish those foundational pieces, myself. So, and how did you grow? We talk about how I read a lot. I read right now. I just read Optima by Daniel Goleman and Chernis. And they've been studying this whole emotional intelligence concept for over 25 years. And so I'm taking some of the lessons from there. Also, Stephen M. Covey, Trust and Inspire, because it's no longer a command and control, a hierarchy platform that we're dealing in nowadays. We got to better relate to people. So those are my foundational pieces for champion organizational wellness. As I put this triangle in place, as organizational wellness in the bottom of the triangle is those three pieces I just talked to there: assessing yourself, getting better, overcoming blind spots, and then having a coaching conversation to link with the person you're trying to, aspire to do better. And then once you come together and meet him wherever that location is on that bottom of the triangle, then you have to go through what I call, you have to be culturally agnostic. What does that mean? I have to understand other culture. I had to, improve my cultural intelligence by talking to people, getting to know them. Like we went into other countries, getting into the trenches with them, understanding life from their perspective so we can better engage them. Then the last piece was the coaching organization, an organization of where you empower people. And I like to use the word more now, encourage people, enable people to do better, through giving them the tools and the instruments, to get exposure, get access to some of the same information as you begin to co-create. And and you do that through a coaching organization. And people will talk about, I want to have a flat organization, but what does it mean to have a flat organization? People don't have access to the same information. They don't have too much to offer you. So you have to imbue people with, a certain level of knowledge where you do strategic thinking and strategic acting in the same space. That way you can deal with change, throughout that organization. So and that's what I really call true empowerment. And that's that, again, I take the organization that has people that are encouraged, empowered, what have you. And then with being culturally agnostic, that's your ways to get to the top of that triangle. And once you're to the top of that triangle, that's what equates to organizational wellness. That y'all walk together there, me as the leader and the aspiring leader. Once we get to the top of that triangle, then it becomes leadership succession, where now that aspiring leader has the same skill sets, the same tools, and that I have, that I can circle him around back into the bottom left of that triangle, that he can bring someone else along. And then we got leadership succession, and we got people that just continue to grow, and then your organization is reaching peak performance. So that's the genesis of organizational wellness. In the last chapter I mentioned earlier was the tools in the back is chapter 8. And those are, you have to have your main thing. What's really important, you have to communicate the same message, to your organization. And mine was always responsibility, accountability, loyalty, and trust. And I always felt that accountability and loyalty was two ways, if I'm senior to junior, junior to senior. And then responsibility is just, you're responsible to the person you work for to do your job. And then loyalty is it's top down. You have to do right by people. Loyalty is one way. Then trust is the other one. There's two ways: trust and accountability. So it's just important for the guys that work for me to trust me. It is for me to trust them. So some people don't understand that sometimes. They just feel like it's a matter of the senior person trusting the junior person. So those are my main thing. And then the other one was you have to have people, you have to have the human resource strategies, professional development strategies for people to give them an opportunity, let them know what the vision, what the future holds for them. Especially in the world we're in today, people wants to, they call it delayed. We did delayed gratification. Nowadays, people want gratification to be a little more tangible. And then it's the mentor and with a coach and protege model. And then it's the cross-functional training. Those are the tools that I use in that final chapter. And that's how you sustain organizational wellness, by giving people the underpinning to grow. And then that way they're still around. We try to get rid of this quiet quitting. So they just have to be assured that, they are connected and people are actually investing in their well-being.
Yeah. I mean, you said a lot there. So I want to maybe just talk about a couple of things. But I mean, if you were going to design culture, if you were going to redesign a culture today, given just what you've seen, because you worked with multiple organizations and you came out of a very large organization, a very structured organization, as we said earlier, the U.S. Navy. I'm curious if there's something that would have to be part of the design build of a organizational culture, corporate culture, for example, or doesn't have to be corporate, but a culture that's being designed on purpose today. Given what's going on in the world, the environment we're in is not the same as it was before the pandemic. And I'll say anecdotally, what we hear from organizations that we work with, we hear that their culture was what got them through the pandemic. That's we hear that frequently. They attribute the culture as part of the what was their sort of their superhero power, or their the thing that buoyed them in the midst of that uncertainty. And I get that, and that makes sense. But on the other side of the pandemic, asking that organization or those leaders this questions about how their culture is today, they say, well, it's not the same culture as it was before. And so if the pandemic were to happen right now, and that organization was to have to come together the way it did years ago, just a few years ago, it might not be the same result, because the culture feels different than it did before. I want to come back to you and ask you to comment on any of that, whether you've also seen that the culture before pandemic and post-pandemic is different, and really back to the first question of, like, if you were going to build a culture today, what would it look like? If it would look differently than it would have looked 5 years ago, what would be the difference?
Absolutely. I told you, I study a lot. I read a lot. You have to, because in order to add value to people, you have to understand and pace, the changes. And I recently read Hybrid Workforces, because they talk in culture. Sometimes in how does a hybrid workforce really work? You got to be careful not to over constrain a problem. No, hybrid, we did remote, during the COVID. Before then, it was more on site. So now we want to sort of have your cake and eat it too. We're going to have both, right? So now we got to determine who's hybrid and who's not hybrid. How do we do this? How do we do that? So you got to be very careful. Don't, sort of envision something that's not tenable. So that's my concern with that part. And some people don't know where they are culturally. But you have to establish a culture as a leader, and you have to be very genuine as you establish that culture. And according to Shen, some research, it's 4 culture types. Okay, you got the hierarchy culture. You have the clan, that means where everyone come together as a team. You have the market, that's in order to pace change, in society, chase the market. And then you got the ad hocs, culture, where you stand up for certain situations. Okay, now, I have a friend I went to officer school with named Mark Devine. He came up with this term called V.U.C.A. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's doing a lot of great things out there, post-military as well. But V.U.C.A means
V.U.C.A, right?
Yeah, V.U.C.A. That means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So, and that's what that really means. That means you got a dynamic external actors. The market is all over the place. Things are changing, people are changing. So how do you do that? And I mentioned earlier about strategic thinking and strategic acting in the same space, right? So that means you have to empower people. And what clan cultures do, they develop, people, and train them, increase their skill sets so they can work together. So yes, there's always be some hierarchy structure like the military, but the environment we in today, you have to have what I call, and I'm doing a presentation down in Florida for the American Nurses Conference on the 28th, 29th of May. And so I'm putting a product out there. You have to blend those cultures. You have to do hybrid cultures nowadays. You can't just fixate on market. And that's what you'll find sometime in the defense contractor sector. People trying, chasing market conditions. And sometimes it's, when I say market, what does that mean? I mean, a lot of stuff is based on profit and loss, more so than anything. But to cut personnel sometimes because the market drives that. But then people feel like you are being disloyal to them now. So you have to have a combination of that market culture as well as that clan culture. You got to still grow and develop people. You got to invest in people as well as, they do understand the conditions, but you have to also make them appreciate what it is you're doing so they can, have a big grasp. You just can't be disingenuous about how you really, managing your organization from a cultural perspective. So you got to be agile within those cultures, and you got to blend them in a hybrid-like fashion, because there's a lot of moving parts. You want to turn all those volatile conditions into opportunities and, put a positive spin on them. So that's my take there.
When you were in the Navy, you really, and I'm speaking for you, but I'm asking you to correct me.
Okay.
If I'm speaking out of turn, I would imagine you weren't worried about your job security. As in, if you did your job, you were going to keep your job. And if you did your job well, there was a road ahead, there was a career path that you could at least look to and plan on to some degree. That's accurate, right?
That's very accurate. Yes, you had job security. Yes, and you see a similar approach now. I mean, when I retired, I could have became, applied, became a government civilian, and had the same level of security. That's the other option is not become a government civilian and become more a contractor, which I chose the latter.
Right.
And with less security. And so, why did I do that? Because I felt that I prepared myself, I could bolster or enhance my job security by being better prepared. So,
Right. I guess the reason I'm bringing that up was just because it is a curious thing that when you watch organizations again coming out of the pandemic, many of them that were just at the beginning sort of wondering if how much pain would they endure, and for some
yeah,
whether they'd even
yeah,
survive. And then 2 years later, they were having their best years, one
yes,
after another, best year, best revenue, et cetera. And yet in the same context, there were layoffs that were
yes,
happening, and people
yes,
were contracting, and the market, as you say, market culture based on market
hmm,
forces, they began to contract, and people were losing their jobs. And
yes.
it's an interesting thing when we think about what effective culture looks like, that in the midst of that, there's this insecurity that's baked in. And I wonder if you have an opinion as to whether or not that inherent insecurity on the part of people that are working in those jobs actually is helpful to them, is helpful to the organization's performance, and in developing the kind of culture that can succeed for the long term, whether that insecurity or fear even plays out well, or is useful, or whether it's counterproductive action.
But that's a loaded question.
It
you
is a
know,
bit of a loaded question.
and
It,
and,
it
and
is, and feel free to like push it back at me, anything you like there. But
no,
I think it's an important question.
it's a very important question, and there's no direct answer to that question. Once again, we go to being resilient. We talk about being agile. We talk about being flexible, and we have to be sometimes comfortable being uncomfortable. Use the word security, how you are as a person, right? And risk. Some people are risk adverse. When we had the pandemic, it was tough, but we adapted as a country. And I always like to think America as a whole, we're a very resilient country. We do get comfortable, and we got innovative and creative as a result of the pandemic. And go back and read history, went through the Great Depression. We've been through so much in this country. So I think stuff that happens in life, I think it always happens. I think it makes us better. And when I do face challenges in life, I have setbacks, I look at it as opportunity to get better, to learn lessons there. And you can't walk scared, in life. You got to understand your landscape, and you got to be able to deal with whatever the circumstances are. You can't look at a completely risk averse world. And that's the only thing I can say for is your culture. You got to just teach people reality, teach them to be flexible, keep them informed. And you look at everything as it's an organizational problem. It's not an individual problem. I'm really big on the sum of the whole. You bring all the minds together, you keep people in the know, and you can do risk mitigation, by encouraging people to work with you as a team. They can see the changes, they can see the dynamics, and they can help inform you so you can sort of stay ahead of the power curve or get to the left of the problems. There can always be problems. There are always going to be unknowns. There's always a fog of war, that we learn in the military. And
Sure.
so in society, we have to look at, the market in certain manners. So you put mitigators in through preparing people so we can all, sort of pace the problem and adapt the best we can. So I
Right.
think what 9/11 did, I think it prepared us for the next setback or challenge we may face.
Yeah, it's this so interesting reading I did on the way the Coast Guard prepared ahead of time for 9/11. They were one of the most prepared groups on that day because they had
Yes.
been involved in a certain amount of training and future casting, scenario planning exercises. Because nobody's got a crystal ball, even though I don't know,
Yes.
maybe in 1993 or 4, the Trade Center was bombed, as we all know, and that was a
Yes.
major event. So there were signs that this could happen, or something like it could happen. I don't believe personally. I know there's a book written with this title, Black Swan, but I don't think there's any such thing, because anything that
No,
happens was inevitable.
that's true.
Right.
Yes.
It happened. So clearly it could have been, it could have happened. But the Coast Guard was very much thinking about, and not just thinking about it, but actually embodying what it would be like to live, to be involved in one of those remote situation.
Yes.
And therefore they were able to grapple ahead of time with what it would look like and then be prepared. So I couldn't agree with you anymore about those aspects of resiliency. In fact, Darwin, that's often quoted when people think about what resilience is or what strength is. They say it's the survival of the fittest. That
Yes.
right, but it's actually a misquote in some respects, because he says actually it's not the ones that are the strongest that survive, or even the ones that are most intelligent in our species. It's the most adaptable. It's what you said.
Exactly. There
Yeah,
we are.
and I couldn't agree more that the United States of every nation on the planet that I know anything about, the United States has been incredibly adaptable, because
Yeah.
we've been through the shit and then some.
Yes, that's true. Now you
And we're
and you
still
go
going
back.
through it.
That's true, and and I just have the epiphany when I'm a parallel the Coast Guard into what you say was Darwinism and the most adaptable. The Coast Guard they worked for DOD during war, and they was prepared to work. They worked for DOT during peacetime. Department of Transportation. They did law enforcement. They also prepared to flex into the DOD side. So that in itself gives them flexibility and adaptability. So I'm not surprised that they was the one that responded in kind. So it was that they make up. So they've been agile for some time and flexible and adaptable. So
Interesting. Yeah, there's
yes,
something there. There's something there for us that'll be good for follow-up. But and the other thing that you brought up that I think is really important, and this is kind of it's not a tough love conversation, but I had this out with somebody. I literally had this out with a guest on my show the other day, because there's an element of self-responsibility that's embedded in this. Because I think that the tension here is on the organizational side. When you think about culture, to me, transparency is important. I get it that you're not going to let everybody know every detail of your plan and your strategy any more than
yes,
high command would let enlisted men and women
yes,
or others know, because it's just not what you would do. It wouldn't make
yes,
sense, right? But there's a certain level of not sort of entrapping people or leading
yes,
them to believe something that's not actually true. Like when organizations talk about this being a family, I get it. I love my family. I love my friends, and I consider, to me, my family be every man, woman, and child on this earth on some level from a spiritual side. But when you're working at a place and people talk about it being a family, and the next minute they're laying off their family as though they're strangers, there's a conflict there. There's an issue with that. So to me, there's some level of both honesty, transparency about what this relationship really does look like, and another level of, if that is going to be a part of the cycle, and let's just say it is a natural part of the cycle. It's a predictable part of the cycle that when market forces require it, organizations to take care of stakeholders, which is a separate conversation, but assume that that's not going to change, that the stakeholders are going to be the sort of the tip of the spear. Then there's going to be times when we contract, and contraction is going to mean reduction in force and stuff like that. So prepare those people not only for that eventuality, if you want to call it that, right, but also what kind of training can we provide them? What kind of support can we give them to be more adaptable? Because you're not an average guy. That's just the truth of it. Like Anthony, you were not average in high school. You weren't average when you took apart that pistol, when you took apart the car. I mean, these are not things that a lot of people do. And then when you join the Navy, you have a certain self-determination, but also a high standard of self-responsibility. Because then when you feel that way, no matter what life throws at you, no matter what your employer throws at you, you're going to land on your feet, because you're able to think on your feet. But a lot of people honestly have not been trained that way. That's not their prior life experience. And so they're kind of like relying on their employer to take care of them. If they put in their 40, 50 hours, or they do whatever like that's where they're coming from. And
yeah.
I think we could do a better job of training people, especially those young folks and middle managers that don't seem to get a lot of the training dollars when it comes to how organizations allocate training development
Yeah.
investment.
I really love talking to you. First, I'll thank you for that vote of confidence there and those compliments. I really appreciate that. But you just really bring some more insight into me here. We talk first thing, trust. Okay, that's the term. That's the underpinning. We have to do a better job developing trust. As you mentioned earlier, you can't give people everything. Some people don't, but you got to develop more trust. You got to be more transparent. People talk. I do I read Fast Company articles, and it's just constantly drumbeat up. People not communicating, not communicating, not communicating. So why are they not communicating? Because they're not trusting. Now, I had a concept that always have worked for me and in command. I had people from all over the world, as I talked earlier in the show. People have different, Navy are probably one of the most diverse services when it comes to, we got guys that come in that don't do quite as well, they ass fabs, and then we got guys that's rocket scientists, straight out of high school. So I always feel like you're only as strong as your weakest link. Okay. And I strive on that. Then you got the Pareto rule that 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. My concept is team within teams. If I got someone that's really super smart, really gifted, then they got to help the people around them, because we're the sum of the whole. Okay, we got to make each other stronger. And the worst, when I go to a classroom and teachers, they want to show you their A students, right? That kid gonna be an A student regardless of whether or not you teach them anything, because they just driven. How about those kids that come in here that start out maybe D's, fell in, don't have confidence, not quite as gifted? Now, are your A students helping those kids become better? Are you working as a team? That's what I always try to promote. I always had the team within teams. I wanted everyone in our organization. We didn't have any peons. I was convinced that there's no failures in the world. Some people just don't know how to win, how to succeed. So I always look across everyone, because it was the sum of the whole. And I think that's what we have to be able to give back and help each other, to make each other strong. So I just never bought into the, 20% of the people doing 80% of the work, or the A team and B team concept. We're all one team, and we're going to balance out, with God-given skills and make everyone on the team better and appreciate each other. So that's what has always worked for me. Every time I had command, even before I became a commanding officer, I had a department, that I oversaw. I had a division before that, and it's always been the same. That just has worked for me throughout. And the same thing with sports. Everyone has something to offer. You just got to build them. Everyone was not as fast on the football team, but they had something to offer. Otherwise, they wouldn't put the uniform on every day.
Indeed. And from having worked, I've done some work for the Marines, for the Marine Corps, and which is an aspect of the Navy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yes. They like to say they're the men department of the Navy. You don't have to challenge that, though.
I'm not going to get into that. But I will say this. The concept that came up, I remember when I was working with a group of officers, and we were talking about just not leaving anybody behind. Like the idea
Yes,
is,
yes,
right?
yes.
You don't leave a man behind. You don't leave a
Okay.
woman behind. So
Yes.
you don't leave anybody behind. And I
Yes.
think that's that concept. I'm wearing my Resilience shirt today, but I got another one that says "Got Your Back," and
Oh,
that
super.
probably would have even been better for this conversation. But I think that's. So from a cultural standpoint, to me, that's a really important thing, that people can feel that
Yes.
if they could say nothing else, they could say, I know where I go to work, where I put my service in, where I put my time in. It's an environment where people have my back.
Exactly. That's important.
Yeah.
And we have to respect each other, and look for that's why. So we got to get away from our own prisms and our own beliefs sometimes, and just really try to understand each other, regardless, where people are from. So we have to do a better job of that. And I said the operative term is connecting and appreciating each other.
When we learn, I don't want to say if, but Anthony, when we learn how to do that, I hope it's in our lifetimes, honestly, because we as a species just haven't figured this one out yet.
Exactly.
And it is. It could break your heart every single day, because it's just, but you got to I'm a hopeful. I have a hopeful heart, as my as my wife would remind me. I gotta have a hopeful heart.
Well, we'll get there, like, as long as you got people like yourself in the world, and just making a difference. I was talking with a coworker today, and he's been called to do a speech somewhere. He's a retired admiral, and he said, "Yeah, I really want to do this." I said, "But people like you need to be heard. There's a lot of people out there speaking and doing stuff." I said, "And you very even kill." I said, "You do the country a disservice when you're not one of the people that's heard. I know it's not, you don't like to be front and center. You don't like a lot of attention. But you just have so much to offer." And once we get people like that, people like yourself, that's more vocal, I think we'll make some progress, and sometimes we can only measure progress, so
Yeah. Well,
that's,
it is a good thing that it's so easy for everybody to sort of be a broadcaster these days, that it's possible to have a voice just by sticking a mic in your in front of you and all that good stuff. But
yes.
I got to say, once again, I'll end as I began, to say, Dr. Simmons, has been a pleasure to speak with you today, and I appreciate your insights and your time. And I just want to, yeah, I want to wish you well on your continued journey. And I'll say this: is there one thing that you do on a ritual basis, daily basis, whatever it might be, that keeps you resilient? How you define that word?
Yes, I do. I really read, I read a devotion every day,
Mm.
and I always think the Bible is the biggest, book of leadership, the most powerful book on leadership. And almost like every day, whatever scripture I read, it applies to where I am that day. So, and I do that before I open my computer, before I do anything. I've been doing this for about 3 years now,
Yeah.
and it's probably one of the best, things that rituals I ever started.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
I have a similar practice, and it's very personal. Obviously, not everybody's
yes,
listening to this is gonna, you know, it's gonna be a thing for them, and some people are probably nodding their head, going, "Yeah, it's like my secret weapon." It's like when you have that start. For me, when I have that start to the day, and it's not, it is so personal that there's so many things that are set into motion, really,
yeah,
from that starting off with sort of getting back to the truth of things. We all are, as human beings, I mean, we all have the same basic desires, whether it's
yes,
peace, happiness, love, fulfillment, prosperity, all these things. Doesn't matter where in the world you are. It doesn't matter what religion you believe in or don't believe in, or your politics. None of that on that level. None of that. To use your word earlier, you could be agnostic to all of it. It doesn't matter, because it's all the same. We're all this.
yes,
We're all baked of that same stuff. And there's to me, what I love about having a set practice, a ritual at the beginning of the day, to be still, to sit in gratitude, maybe to read something. And I do just like you. I read something that often has a reference point to something in the Bible, because it is, while I'm not a Bible scholar and I'm not a particularly religious
yes,
person, but I love just how potent it is, how tangible, how relevant, real it is, even to this day. But you have to be able to connect dots. You have to be able to see through even language that is archaic, that's old. It's
yes,
not,
yes.
but you got to be able to assimilate that and see what the value is today. And to me, it's a worthwhile practice. So I
Yes.
always
Yes.
appreciate somebody else who's getting benefit out of it too.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I attended Regent University for that reason, because I wanted to get strong in that area. So at least I understand, the exercise more so. So it's yes, I feel a lot better. Thanks. Thanks.
Me too.
All
Me
right.
too.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Hey, thanks, Adam, so much. Okay.
A
All right.
pleasure.
Bye. All right.
Well, I did thoroughly enjoy that conversation, and Dr. Simmons, Anthony, as he permitted me to call him. No, Anthony he's something special. 28 years in the Navy. He is, you could hear, is an incredibly insightful man and a humble man. I mean, he's really had some significant roles of leadership throughout his career, and since retiring from the Navy as well. And yet he is just a very just a one of these quiet people, quiet leaders, not quiet in the sort of shy sense, but again in that sense of having humility, which to me is this mix of confidence without arrogance. Or confidence without being oppressive, from a standpoint of how you treat people, how you talk to them, your tone, and where your ego intersects with all of that. And so humility, I think, is vitally important. It's one of those qualities that is difficult to define at times. And it's also something I think that the greatest leaders have worked on, have seen it as something that was worthy of their time, and often is an area that needs development. I know in my own journey as a leader, that has been something I've been focused on as well, but not with total success. It's a work in progress. Today, Andy and I we got to really get into some really deep stuff when it comes to how organizations from a culture standpoint are doing today, and where it is that we can create greater wellness within those organizations, and what it takes to create champions for organizational wellness. We got to talk about trust and the value of importance of trust, and where, interestingly enough, it might be that people are having trouble communicating, and where there's communication challenges that's based on a lack of trust. That was one area that we talked about. We talked about cultural intelligence and how vital that is, and where it is that in developing that agnostic belief system, meaning that you are not looking at the diversity of culture as a separation point, but rather as a commonality, as a common ground. So therefore, you're agnostic to what those cultural differences might be. I think he used the Navy as a great example of that, traveling to, I think he said 68 countries, but wanting the naval presence in those places to be integrative, not to be intrusive, not to be sort of an outsider, but more, if possible, woven into the culture of the place where they were stationed, where they were able to potentially even make a difference in some way, add value, provide service, be of some benefit to those other people. All that was just very, very telling. I love what he talked about creating the team within the teams, and how it is so important that the players, the A players in particular, are involved in helping others to succeed. So that people that have less acumen for something, potentially, maybe because it's a lack of training or a lack of experience, or maybe it's even some personal shortcomings that can lead one person to be less successful or less of a performer than someone else. That is the job of the team, to bring everybody along, to look out for one another, to have each other's backs, is the term that I expressed as how we refer to it at Workwell, at our company, working with other companies. That you want to create cultures that are got your back cultures versus watch your back cultures, where people truly do know, as like they know almost nothing else as a certainty, but what they do know for sure is that the people that they work with are there to support them, that they're there to support others, that it's that got your back environment, similar to the way in the military theater, people know that's what keeps everybody safe, that's the essence of how they can achieve something as one unit, when they're not worried about whether somebody behind them is actually looking to see them succeed, because they know that no one succeeds without everyone succeeding. No one gets left out or left behind. And I think that where we can incorporate that to create this greater performance and a culture where people can truly show up as the best they can be without fear and insecurity, that's ultimately what we're after. And again, not to promise what is not possible. So organizations are going to go through changes. There's going to be structural changes. There's going to be restructures based on market conditions. All of that is evident. All of that is true. But we need to be truthful with people, so that they have to understand at whatever stage they're at, that's potentially the case. It's a potentiality. It's an event, and for some, it's an eventuality. But if we train, if we give people our true care, if we are helping them, supporting them to rise to the best level that they're capable of rising to, then they can adapt. They can be adaptable both within the organization, if their journey includes staying there, or if their journey means being somewhere else, that they'll be not only able to survive, but they'll actually be able to thrive truly, because they've developed this resiliency that comes from learning how to adapt. And those are not necessarily things that we are trained or taught in school, or taught by our parents or others as we are growing up. So these are skills that organizations can imbue and impart and train along the way. And it shouldn't be, in my personal opinion, and this is, the caveat here is this is my personal opinion, that these are not, shouldn't be left only to the upper reaches of leadership, that only senior level leaders get access to these types of training, but rather that we invest the time, the energy, the resources, the money to allow for training to occur earlier on in the career path, so that people do learn at a minimum some of these essential skills that will only hold them in good stead, again, if their career continues within that vein, or whether it leads elsewhere for whatever reason. So again, love the conversation. Dr. Simmons really, I think, it laid out some structures for us, talking about self-awareness and what the importance of that is, as well as in overcoming our blind spots, and in creating organizations that again, to the point I've just made, are coaching organizations where we are providing people with feedback on a consistent basis, so that they can know what those blind spots are, and we can help them to overcome them. And so just again, so appreciate your tuning in, and that this is hopefully something valuable for you. If it is, if this episode was valuable, I would love it if you'd share it with someone else. That's always the greatest sort of compliment you could give, is to when you appreciate something, that you share it with someone else. Maybe it's an insight, maybe it's an idea that you'll share as well. And of course, when you do share it, then the powers that be, the algorithm that controls so much of what content shows up for us, each of us, in our various platforms that we are consuming content from, that this podcast will show up in more places because you've either shared it with somebody else, or you've actually taken a moment to rate it, to give it that 4 or 5 star rating on. Hopefully you'd think it was worth the 5 stars. But that takes time for you to do. And if you choose to do it, we so appreciate it. That is how our community has grown significantly. That's how we're able to reach more people with this message. And I thank you in advance for taking the time out of your very, very important work to do that for us. Lastly, something that I highly recommend, for you and for members of your team, if you'd like to get a snapshot in this moment in time, how resilient you are mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually speaking, you have access to this. It's free. And the insights are pretty remarkable in so many respects, but we've been able, through our research, to really pinpoint several things on the emotional intelligence side, as well as in the area of spiritual resilience that come up consistently through our data. If you want to get access to our Resilient Leader Assessment, just go to rankmyresilience.com, rankmyresilience.com. And no questions, no strings attached. You get 16 questions, and you'll get a confidential report that is just for you. And you'll get some resources that are based on what your report has found. And those will be valuable for yourself and for those around you, as well as potentially anybody that you might share it with. So again, thank you so much for being a part of our community. Thank you for tuning into this show. And I look forward to you getting access to more and more in the future. Again, thank you, and ciao for now.
Thanks for listening. We hope you now have even more tools and greater insights to build resilience and become change-proof. Remember to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and you may be featured in an upcoming episode. For more resilience tips and strategies, including support for building change-proof teams, visit adammarkel.com. To get your own free resilience assessment, go to rankmyresilience.com.